I'm talking to Jennifer Andrews, who has just written a new book, which is called Four Seasons in the French Pyrenees. And welcome to the Groove Book Report, Jennifer. And tell me, is this your year in Provence?
Thanks, Tim. Yes, effectively, I like to call it a bit of a cross between a year in Provence and location.
Sounds good. Tell me, this is about Four Seasons in the Pyrenees, but actually you are a regular visitor to France, aren't you? And as you say in your book, no matter what the money is, no matter what the conditions, you always want to get back there. So tell me about how did this start? It started in childhood, really, this love affair with France, didn't it?
Yeah, it did really. I mean, I grew up with French in the household through my father's work. We had the privilege of spending time in France when I was a child, including a couple of periods when I went to French school. And I think that instilled with me an innate sense of language and culture, and although I didn't necessarily appreciate it at the time, it became something which was intrinsically a part of me. And then when I met my husband and we spent more time living overseas, we spent quite a lot of time in France on holidays, lots of friends there, lots of connections, and so a real lifelong affinity, and we've both become quite strong Francophiles, I guess.
Ah, right. So you're basically Wellington-based now. You were born in Dunedin, and then you move across to this tiny little place. How do you say it? Is it Quillan? Quillan, which is a French village in the southwestern region, nestled in the foothills of the Pyrenees. Now, tell me about how's the Pyrenees. I know it for cheese, skiing, mountain climbing, that kind of thing. But how does that compare to, say, Wellington?
Look, it's very different. I mean, compared to New Zealand, there's a lot of similarity, and I think there may be something in that that's attracted us, because we've always found the Pyrenees, the French Pyrenees in particular, to be a real draw card for us. We've had holidays there and just long loved it. It's a very wild, slightly remote area, mix of farming and viticulture, amongst other things, little enterprises. And I think there's something that reminds us of New Zealand, particularly having grown up in the South Island. You know, that mountainous kind of foothill country is very reminiscent of parts of New Zealand. So yeah, and just, you know, the remoteness, I think, the wild nature of it, and I suppose a degree of authenticity that you don't find in some of those honeypot villages of France and other countries.
And I have to ask about the challenge of taking a family over there. When Peter Mayle did it, you know, in his famous book, he was more or less retired by that stage, and he was looking to write a novel. He was going to settle down. It was just him and his wife, and his son occasionally popped over and things like that. But you took 3 schoolboys, one was 6 months, or one was 6 months. You know, the most challenging thing. How did they feel about being uprooted and moving to such a wild place?
Yeah, look, I certainly envy Peter Mayle. Nice if you can do it. And taking a family is a different kettle of fish entirely. Look, it's challenging. You have to prepare. You have to think about things. But frankly, I suppose the way I've kind of come to think of it is, you know, family life is challenging wherever you are. And really, you know, it's just a mindset. If you've thought about things, if you've got the will to do it, you know, it's no more difficult than managing a family in New Zealand. You just have to sort of think a bit more about some of the things and the juggling acts. They all, you know, and to your point about, you know, what they got out of it, they all, you know, I suppose they went with a degree of reluctance, but they got a lot out of it. And I think they, you know, not only at the time and the specific activities that they each enjoyed, but also the long-term benefits in terms of what they've brought back to their life here in New Zealand.
Tell me about living there day to day. I mean, where were you living? I'm expecting a tiny little French rundown sort of farmhouse or something, one of those sort of ancient villages, or describe it for me.
Yeah, look, it's a small town of about 3,500. Used to be, in its heyday, at least a couple of times that size, when manufacturing was big. Hat industry and Formica had a big presence there until they pulled out in the late 90s. So it's a lot smaller than what it was, but a beautiful old town on a river bend, very picturesque in a basin of hills, so spectacular setting, and proximate to so much of so many of the areas of interest in that vicinity. So, an hour from the Mediterranean, an hour from ski fields, an hour from Carcassonne, and, a couple of hours to Toulouse, big airports and cities. So, really, really beautiful setting. We had the good fortune of first going there and found a place to rent for 3 months over a cafe on the main old square. So all of the, it all that comes with what you would imagine of living on an old French village square, which was just delightful. And then really had an opportunity land on us the second time round, a couple of years later, to go back to that same square but to another side of it and manage a B&B for some people who we got to know first time round, which was just fantastic.
Which is wonderful. So I just imagine in the afternoons you'd be rolling into the square and sitting in the cafe with your pastis and your and your croissants.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate to be on holiday to a degree both times. Although the second time I was writing the book and running the B&B, so it wasn't completely free. But yeah, just the pace of life is different there, and I think even if you are working, nothing seems so important or so pressured that you can't kind of go at a slightly slower rhythm and stop to breathe in the fresh air and have a cup of coffee.
So you're a communication specialist. I imagine you sort of must have been missing your Wi-Fi, your mobile phone, your connection with the world, your instant news, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, look, we didn't completely turn that off. They live in the modern world too down there, and we had Wi-Fi everywhere. But it does force you to think about what's important. So you just kind of don't get so tied into some of those manufactured pressures, I guess.
Is this part of the world where there's the regular things like supermarkets and shops and things like that, or is it more the sort of Saturday market, Sunday market type approach that we read about in Peter Mayall's wonderful romantic descriptions of things? This is something we just can't get away from when we think of this.
Yeah, look, I think that's what we like is, you can still access all of the infrastructure of modern life, including supermarkets, within reach. But the rhythm of the town is very much still in the small enterprise, in the particular days and times of the week when shops are open, and it forces you to just be a bit more fresh, a bit more local, to think about exactly what you need and to buy it in time. Which is just a lovely way to live. It's a reminder of, what's important.
And how did the boys find school? Do they go to, is it a big school they go to or a small village
No,
school?
it's a pretty small school. I mean, they were lucky to be going to a fairly small school in New Zealand, but a school there of only about 70 or 80 pupils total across 4 classes, split year groups. So quite a different mix, quite a different school system. One of the things which it's very much more desk and class-based, with the teacher talking sort of at you rather than interactive, although that is a degree of generalisation. So one thing that my middle son observed, which I hadn't even thought about, that affected him was just he actually came home with a sore back quite early on because he just wasn't used to sitting in one seat for long periods of time.
Interesting. You found yourself actually, didn't you go to school in France for a little bit and had a bit of a language challenge originally?
Yeah, I did. When I was 11, I went to school for a total of about 9 months, big city school for 6 months and a village school for 3 months. And so I, very much went in knowing kind of eyes wide open what the kids would be in for, and was almost more apprehensive on their behalf than actually they were. They were pretty adaptable. So yeah, but it's a challenge going into any different school system, different classroom where you don't know anyone, and really you just don't know the rules, and it's all in a different language. So I mean, I went in with 10 words of French maybe. So one of the things that we were quite keen to do, and we did do, was invest in French language lessons for the boys before we went, just to give them a bit of a start.
Yeah, I would have imagined that just negotiating things like rental agreements and things like that without being able to speak the language would definitely be a challenge.
Yeah, look, it helps to have a base, and I mean, I have a degree of fluency, so I suppose the lion's share of that effort fell to me, but it's certainly, taking the time to learn some of the language before you go is really valuable. And the Alliance Française has been fantastic for us in Wellington with their classes.
Yeah, definitely. And they're, of course, involved in things like Randall Cottage, which is in Wellington, which has a French writer. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, very exciting.
Yes, it comes over. I'm not sure who the next one is, but we're looking forward to that.
Quite soon.
Did you have a chance to work apart from the B&B? Did you get involved in any projects while you were there?
No, look, nothing specific was there because I was really busy doing the writing of the book. Was the prime kind of work, if you like, aside from the B&B. I did get involved quite a lot in community activity in a kind of voluntary sense, so which I think helps in terms of feeling like you're part of the community and it's more than just a holiday. I mean, the biggest opportunity there was joining the local walking group. Which just was fantastic in terms of seeing the countryside and getting off the beaten track, but also meeting people from a wide range of countries, all based in and around Quillon, different languages, and many local French people, which was great because it's actually surprisingly hard when you're there for a relatively short period of time to connect with local people.
And so what sort of characters did you meet?
Oh, all sorts of interesting characters, involved in the community in different way, people running businesses, people met, a fantastic guy on one walk who lived in the neighbouring village who'd never been out of the village pretty much.
Oh, wow.
But had an interest in beekeeping and knew about New Zealand and Sir Edmund Hillary and just through the beekeeping. So fascinating conversations.
When I think of France, I think of cheese, bread, wine. In the Pyrenees, is there anything special that you picked up that was maybe from the culinary or cultural sense that you brought back that says you just can't get that anywhere else?
Oh, yeah, great question. Nothing specifically strikes me. I mean, and actually the Pyrenees is a broad swathe, so whether you're at the Basque end or the Catalan end, as we were, the varieties and the specialities and the language dialects vary quite a lot within that range of Pyrenees. So we're at the Catalan end, very much influenced by the Spanish Catalan heritage. So quite different from, definitely quite different from what you might see in, typical French regions. Very much influenced by that colour and quality. But all those local produce, very much that local produce, cassoulet in particular, the sort of bean and meat casserole specialty comes from the region. So that's one thing that we did enjoy eating quite a lot.
Right, and I would imagine being near the Pyrenees, of course, you can't be far from the El Camino as well. So did you have any travellers from there?
Yeah, look, travellers passing through all the time, and we felt a bit kind of fraudulent, really, on some of our walks, which were quite short and easy compared to some of those, long pathways and vast networks that some of those walkers were traversing.
This is a book about 4 seasons, so I guess, what season did you enjoy the most?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. I'm actually going to say I really enjoyed the autumn. The year we were there across autumn, winter, it was a long Indian summer, and the colours of autumn were just spectacular because there hadn't been a lot of rain. The leaves and the colours stayed on the trees for much longer than they would normally, and it really was quite something spectacular.
Would you recommend this sort of thing to somebody like myself? I mean, I know a little bit about France, but let's say it's schoolboy France, it's about it. But I do have a sort of a passion for trying that at some point in my life. What would be any specific advice you'd give? Oh,
look, I would absolutely recommend this sort of experience to anyone who's got a spark or an interest, it's absolutely possible, even if you've only got a rudimentary knowledge or language base to work from. It's only as easy as deciding to, or as hard as deciding to do it really, and making it happen, within the kind of parameters of your life. So, I mean, we certainly haven't regretted it for a moment.
You're back in New Zealand at the moment. Are you planning on going back again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the tentative plan is to try and get there once a year in the short term, and then just sort of work our way to longer periods of time over the longer term. We're still juggling around the children's school commitments as they get into college, and it becomes harder to miss academic commitments. So absolutely keen and up for going there as often as we can.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you get locked into school life, NCA and things like that, you can't really move away from that, can you?
No, look, nothing's impossible, but it does become harder, and I think you have to be realistic. But, from an academic perspective, but also for the children who don't really, the boys don't want to be missing things at that point, and that's fair enough. So we're just working around really the big school holidays is when we're thinking that we'll likely spend most of our time there over the next few years.
If there's anywhere apart from that region that you would like to go in France, where would that be?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. There's so many places to choose from. I actually love some of the out of the way areas that are slightly off the tourist track. The Landes and Massif Central area in the centre of France is quite spectacular and relatively uncharted. So that's an area I'd like to know better. Also have lots of connections to different parts of France where I'd love to go back if I had the time. We spent 3 months living in Brittany when I was 11, and I'd love to go back there. Quite a different characteristic again with the fishing villages and all the heritage, the Breton heritage.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm dead jealous of this. How dare you write a book and I can't be part of it. but except, of course, I can read it and I can enjoy it. It's kind of a nice, for many of us, it's a bit of a fantasy that we can enjoy alongside. And congratulations on the book. I understand it was launched last week, and you can get it from places like Unity and some of the better booksellers, which is wonderful.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time. Good luck with it, and hopefully we'll see another one.
Thanks very much, Tim. Happy reading.
Thank you.